In this section, we are going to implement BDD in our API testing automation framework. We are going to use SpecFlow as it is most popular BDD framework for .NET. To get more information on this, you can refer my other video on BDD and SpecFlow. Let us see how we can implement BDD using SpecFlow in this framework. I'm going to add a project and I will use this NUnit test project.NET code. I can provide any name, test or smoke test, regression test. I'll just say test. We can select the target framework. All right. So we have to do a few things here. We have to implement BDD using SpecFlow. So we require SpecFlow to be installed for this project. So for Visual Studio, you can install from extension, manage extension, and search here SpecFlow, and you can install for your version of Visual Studio. I have already installed on my system. After installing the extension, you can go and add the NuGet packages for SpecFlow. You can search SpecFlow. So first thing, we need this. So if you want to install for all your projects, we can just select this and say install. I click I accept. Apart from it, I need SpecFlow.NUnit. We may require SpecFlow tools MS build generation, so I can install this as well. And I think that's it for SpecFlow installation. We'll come back if we require anything else to install. Now let us create a, before this, make this test project as your startup project. So now it is highlighted. That means this is our startup project. Now I can delete this. I don't require for now. All right. I'm going to add the reference of this API automation project into the test. So I can right click, add, and go to project reference. I can select which project I want to refer in this test project so that I can refer the classes and methods defined in this API.automation project. Let us add a folder called features where we'll keep all our feature files. So feature files basically test scenarios for any specific feature in the application. Right click on the features and click add, click new item. If you have installed extension SpecFlow, you will see this option. Say select SpecFlow feature file. We can say create user. And a feature file will be generated like this. The feature name, you can provide whatever the feature you want to validate. Here is the description. Short description I can provide: create a new user. This is tag. Tag, you can identify your test cases, or you can separate your test cases based on tags like smoke test, regression test, hotfix test, and so on. I'm going to use create user, so I can say scenario name, create a new user with valid inputs. And I can say given user with name, and I can say Peter, and user with job manager. When send request to create user, then validate user is created. So this feature, in this feature file, we are writing all these steps in a Gherkin language, which is a plain text English language with a given, when, then. So now after defining the scenario, what we have to do, and this feature file can have multiple scenarios based on your test scenarios. What I can do, I can right click and say generate step definition. This pop-up window will be provided, and it will show like which all the steps given, when, then will be generated. Okay. The class name, it automatically has provided. I'll keep the same name and click generate. It will ask where you want to save. I can place it under the same folder. Click on save. A class create user steps has been generated. We can open this. Now you have seen the color of these steps has been changed. It means we have generated the steps step definition file. And if you want to navigate, I can go right click, go to definition. So wherever this file has been generated and steps are defined, it will take you to that file. I can change the parameter names. Here I'm passing name, here I'm passing job. I can delete these for now, and I'll provide the actual implementation. All right. So we have already defined the models, few models which will be used as a data transfer object of payload. We'll mention here. Private, and the model name is create user request. So I can say create user request, and I can import this. Create user request. Apart from it, I may require response. So I can take it from RestSharp, REST response, and I can import this. And I can say response. We may also need few other things which may add it later. For now, what we can do, define a constructor and pass the scenario context. All right. And I can define scenario context. Scenario context is part of SpecFlow, and this class provides a lot of methods which we can use to share the data between the steps, and it has a lot of information about the steps. It will have the information about the scenario status, and step context. So this will be very useful in our this step definition file for sharing the data between steps to get the status of the steps and other things as well. We can inject data transfer object as well, but for now I'm just using this scenario context. We can use this, like as I mentioned, data transfer object or model. So how I can inject? So I can say create user request, that model name, and create user request. And this create user request and assign this to this. Okay, using this create user request, I can create the payload. So let us pass the parameter value to the model property. So I will assign whatever we are passing from the feature file data, I'll assign to this property name. Same way I'll do here, pass this parameter job to the job property. Now the next step, when I send a request. So for sending a request, I have to create the API client object, and we have to import this. So it says, okay, let's see what we are passing here. And we are passing the base URL. So if you are passing from our test, so we can pass, but for this demo purpose, what I can say, let us hard code here. Later we'll move this. So read only string base URL, and I can say https rec res.in. I can remove this and use this. I can define this as a constant. Okay. It says the modifier read only is not valid for this item. Okay, so let us say, yeah, as we are already saying, it is a constant. Fine. Okay, now I can call create user, and here I have to pass the model, and this model, let me go to this, and this model we can pass the request model. So I can say create user request, and I can pass the object create user request. Now this returns, and this is awaitable, means we have to use the await before this and make this as a sync task and delete this void. We can import, and this we can store in the variable the response of REST response type. Okay, so this is how we will send the request and store the response into this variable. Now from this response, we have to validate if our request is successful. So let us use HTTP status code, and we can import, it is a part of system.net, and I can say status code as a variable name, status code. So from this response, we can get the status code, and then I have to cast as an integer, otherwise we'll get OK. So if I have to cast, I have to say integer and status code, then I'll get the success code or HTTP status code 200, 201, and so on. And I can assert using NUnit assertion dot r equal. I can provide the expected. I'm expecting 201 created, and the actual is code which we are getting from the server. So this validates the request is successful and we have received a response from the server. How we will validate the content of the response body? So we have to utilize the deserialize object where we'll pass the response and it will be deserialized and return as a data transfer object. To manage this deserialization in a better way, what I can do, I can create a folder in API automation called utility. In this utility folder, I can add a class named handle content. We'll write few methods here. So first method we can write to get the content from the response. So as a utility method, I'll mark it as a static, and I'll make this method as a generic get content. And the type which will be passed here as parameter will be the REST response, and have to import this response. So first I have to do to get the content from the response. So this property holds the content, and then I have to return this deserialize object. I can use JSON convert of NewtonSoft JSON. So this class provides the method deserialize object, and I can pass the content here which we have extracted. So this class we can utilize here to send the response and get the data transfer object from the content. So I can use this handle content, and I have to import this. It is called this get content, and here I have to provide the create user response model name, create user response, and pass the response from here. This will return the content as a object, and now I can assert so first thing, let us utilize the payload properties which we have assigned the data from the feature file. So I can use create user request.name as a expected value. So I'm expecting whatever I have passed from this create user request.name, and expected I will take from content.name, and same for other job. I'll take from this payload what we have sent to the server, and I'll take the actual value from the response job. So this is how we can create the feature file, generate the step definition, implement the logic here to implement the behavior-driven development with a SpecFlow in API automation framework.